Welcome to the Sage Intacct Product Tour. I'm Bob Shago. I work in Sage Intacct Product Marketing. Today we're going to look at why Sage Intacct has made such a big difference in the financial health of growing companies. We're going to do this by diving into the product and looking at a few of the ways Sage Intacct brings visibility and productivity to finance teams. We aren't going to dive into every area of the product today, but rather stick to those things that are they're more of a general interest to most companies. If you're dealing with specialty areas like subscription contracts or project accounting or inventory management, those are part of other specialized product tours. Today, we're going to look at the order to cash process and the automation around getting revenue into your company. We're going to look at procure to pay, which involves controlling spending and automation around approvals. Then we'll dive into Sage Intacct's built-in tools to provide visibility. And lastly, we'll wrap up with a closer look at managing multiple locations or multiple entities. Before we dive into the system demo, I'd like to set the stage with a little bit about why we're looking into these particular areas. So as a growing company, you face challenges in finance. So many of these challenges can actually become a bottleneck to a growing company. Are you seeing a growing number of transactions in both revenue and expenses? Are those transactions occurring at more locations where information is slow to make it back to the main office? And are you finding the close and subsequent visibility taking longer and longer? Throwing more people at the problem has its own challenges and often leads to less control over financials. So we should be celebrating growth, but often the finance team is stuck cleaning up a lot of messes created by growth. The simple task of responding to customers about sales orders can become a monumental task of sifting through data. This can lead to a drop in customer satisfaction, adversely affecting the growth we're striving for. When every location is making purchases on their own, you lack the controls necessary to capitalize on the new scale of your growing company. No one's holding vendors accountable, picking the best vendors, or capturing the benefits of volume purchasing, and approvals, where they exist, become a manually intensive game of find the manager. The reporting spreadsheets that worked so well when you were small become cumbersome and error-prone. So closing the books and using spreadsheets to get out end-of-month reports or end-of-period reports can take many days or weeks. In fact, it often takes so long that the reports are out of date as soon as they're completed. All of this leads to questionable decisions being made on old or questionable data. Continued growth in a competitive environment requires a more nimble approach to finance. In today's demo, we're going to dive into examples of a more nimble approach made possible through the power of cloud computing. An ideal solution would include a sales order system that is both automated in terms of workflow and quickly accessible to answer questions about orders in real time. In purchasing, automated workflows made the process completely transparent, and approvals are automated as part of every purchase. Reporting should be built in and configurable by the accounting team without the help of IT. It should capture real-time metrics that help the company see where they're going each day. An appropriate report should be available for review by any manager or stakeholder without having to request information from the finance team. And from a single login, finance leaders should be able to see financials across all their locations or entities, both individually and consolidated. And they should be able to see this consolidated view at any time, not just at the end of the reporting period. So let's go ahead and get started by diving into our first area of the product, order to cash. Our biggest focus here is going to be on how we streamline the order process and provide the ability to handle customer questions quickly and efficiently. What you're looking at right here is a dashboard, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. What we want to do right now is go over to order entry. And so across the top here, we have our different applications within the system. So I'm going to go ahead and choose order entry. This brings us to our order entry overview. Here we can access our different data tables like customers, warehouses, product lines, things like that. We can also get to this workflow under tasks. And this is where we're going to spend some time. We've got create a sales quote, create a sales order, fulfill an order, create a sales invoice. And we can create one of these and then progress it forward along this workflow without re-entering data. And so I can actually start at any point here. I can start with a sales quote. I can start with a sales order and then move that forward. If for some reason I need to, I can go ahead and create with I just start by creating a sales invoice as well. But I've gone ahead today and I've created a sales quote. So I'm going to jump over here to the left. This is our pop-out menu on the left. Here we've got this bar, and here we have all our different transactions. And so instead of clicking on the plus or on this button here, I'll just click on the name of the thing I want to get to, and I'll get to a list of ones that are already built. So if I click on sales quote, I go to the sales quote list, and I've already started this sales quote here for JIT Chemical Corp, and it's in draft mode. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up by opening it to edit. And you can see across the top I have everything about this. I have the transaction date, the due date, the item total, all the information that goes into this. I can see the status is draft, which means it's not ready to be moved forward in the workflow at all. I've simply created a draft of this and the system's holding it for me to finish up. When I entered the customer here to start this, it automatically filled in the information for the quote to and ship to. The payment terms were put in automatically, but I can change those. I added a reference number, the customer's PO number that they were working off of. And I can go ahead and add attachments as well. I could, if I had an image or a PDF of that purchase order, I could add that to the attachments, or I might want some other document that goes along with this sales quote. Down here I have my line items. And right now I have two line items. I've got their Defender Pro, which is their security system, one of those. And I have these add-ons. You can't see the full line here, but for it to pull it up, it's the motion detector. So I've got 8 motion sensors to go with the security system. I'm going to go and add another line item here, and that is that they want to get 4 of these cameras. And so we'll go ahead and add in that. We'll set the amount here to 4. And I want to show you something interesting. So we've got some information here that we'd expect on a line item, right? We've got quantity, unit, price, extended price. And as I click out of that, the extended price will update automatically. So I've got the 4 units accounted for. But then I've got this drop-down menu on each line, and it shows additional information. I can extend the description. I can write a memo about the price calculation, if the price calculation is maybe out of the ordinary. If this was some kind of a contract or some kind of a subscription, I could put in a start and an end date. And then this part down here, this is actually where we're going to change something or add something in the dimensions. We've got location, department, project, customer, vendor, class, and we've got a user-defined dimension, which could be named anything you want. And this is just to show you that you can add these different dimensions. And what these dimensions do is they tag the transaction. And we're going to go ahead and set the location. We're going to say that this one's in Texas. And remember, we're going to get back to multi-entity or multi-location later on in this presentation. But for now, let's just go ahead and tag this, that this transaction's applying to the Texas location, where this order is going through the Texas location. And I'm going to go ahead and close this, hide those details. And I've already set that on the other 2 line items. And I'm going to go ahead and post this. Now with that posted, it's brought us back to the same page, this list that we looked at, but there's a new link here. It's called Convert. And so from this point, and I can also do this from the transaction screen itself once it's posted if I want to go back to it and look at it. But right here, I can click Convert, and I can see that I can convert this to a sales order. I could also convert it to another sales quote. If I want to convert it to another sales quote and then edit it to change something, maybe I'm creating multiple quotes with different options for a client or something. But I can go ahead and create a sales order. So we're going to progress this. I'm going to click Sales Order. And now we've converted this transaction. All the information's come forward, all those line items. I don't have to reset anything. It's come forward to be a sales order. And it can be moved forward in the process. And so I've still got my transaction dates, all my information up here. And at this point, it's in edit mode, and I can go ahead and I can make changes here. I can add a message, or again, I can add another attachment if I got some sort of new confirmation document based on the quote. Maybe at this point I got the purchase order. I can add that in to the attachments, and I can go ahead and post this, which brings me to my sales order list. And again, on this sales order, I have Convert. I can go ahead and make a shipper for this and send that shipper out, post that, and that will go into the operations process to get this shipped out and go out with it. And now I have my list of shippers. And assuming that's been processed and I want to invoice the customer now, I can convert one last time to a sales invoice. And so I've just progressed this all the way through my workflow. I now have a sales invoice. And the difference between the first 3 transactions that we looked at and this sales invoice is the sales invoice is now going to hit the GL. When I post this, it's going to make all the debits and credits I need in the GL to actually be accounting for this transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and post this. Then we're going to look at some other things about these order entry transactions. And so now I have this posted in my sales orders. And since our sales invoices, notice I'm in sales invoices now, I'm going to go back to another one. Let's say a customer calls in. So we've got this customer that we sell to, Texas Alarm Companies, and they call in and they want to know about an order, an invoice that an order that they placed, and they think they received it. They want to know some information about it. And so we can go in here and we can, in the customer column, we just type Texas, right? I don't need the whole name. And it's going to shorten that list for me down to 1. That's great. I had 1 invoice for Texas Alarm Company. Now I can go view this. So I'm going to click view next to this sales invoice. And as I bring up the sales invoice, I can see everything about it. I can see the transaction date, the due date, the totals, the subtotals. I can see that the transaction status is closed and that it was paid. So I have all this header information right away. These are some big questions they ask right off the bat. And I can see what item it was for, the quantity and the price and the total. I can also go into a history and I can look at this history and see that this started out as a sales order. It didn't start out as a quote, it was a sales order. Then it went to a shipper and then went to a sales invoice. By clicking on this, I can bring up any one of these in a little window and look at any details. So I can go back and see if the order differed from the shipper or from the invoice, or if anything changed along the way. I can also see who created it. So I could go back and maybe delve into that if I need to. And I can also see the payment details. I can see when it was paid and how much was paid. And I even have this payment record. I could go view the payment record inside the system and see where it was received to and what bank it went to inside my own system. So I have a lot of information to get to right at my fingertips to serve that customer. So I'm not diving into paperwork, looking up orders. I can do it right on the fly and quickly get that customer the things they need about the order and get that information out to them. That's pretty much all I wanted to share right now about order entry. I'm going to go ahead and move back to my dashboard now that we were at to start with on my CFO's daily view. Let's jump back to our presentation. Now that we've taken a look at order to cash, let's jump over to procure to pay. As you might expect, purchasing follows similar workflows to what I've shown you in order entry. It also has some unique aspects to help you maintain spending control across your organization. Coming back into our product demo, we see that we're back here at our dashboard. We want to focus on the purchasing application at this time. So I'm going to jump over to the purchasing overview. So you can see on this purchasing overview, it's sort of the other side of the coin from order entry. We've got our vendors and warehouses and product lines and items and price lists that we can work with. We also have this workflow, very similar to the workflow we had in order entry, only this time we're dealing with purchasing. And so we can create a purchase requisition, we can create a purchase order, receive a shipment, create a vendor invoice. So this is a very similar type of workflow. So I'm not going to dive so much into the workflow because it really matches what I just showed you in order entry. You're just doing it on the purchasing side. What I want to look at is some of the controls around purchasing and some of the power you have inside of Sage Intacct to make purchasing work for your organization. So in this case, I've gone ahead and logged in. I'm moving to another tab here. I've logged in as another user. This is Drew Jackson. And Drew Jackson, you notice on his app, on his menu here, he doesn't have nearly the applications that I had under my own login because he's not an administrator in the system. He's an employee user and he has limited access to things. He can enter time and expenses. He can do a few things in company. He can look at dashboards that we allow him to look at. He can look at reports that he has access to, and he can look at purchasing. But when we go over to the purchasing overview for Drew, we see that a lot of things are grayed out. Drew doesn't have the ability to create purchase orders or shipments or create vendor invoices, but he can create purchase requisitions. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a purchase requisition really quick as Drew. And I'm going to pick a vendor here. Let's say, we just need to order a few things from Staples. And so we're going to put that in, and we could give a vendor document number if we had something that needed to go in there, but he doesn't have any of this. He's just a request to purchase. And we need to buy some paper here. And, we want to buy 50 reams of paper, or 50 cases of paper. And we want to buy some printer cartridges. And so we're going to buy 10 printer cartridges. I'm really trying to drive up the amount here to make sure that we're covered here. So you can see how the approval process works. And so now that Drew's created this, he can go ahead and submit this. Oh, it's asking us for that location. You remember on the order entry, we went and put in a location for this. So location's locked into our system as something that's required on transactions. Just make sure that everyone puts in locations for the different transactions they're creating. So we need to go and make sure we've put in the location on these transactions. And we're going to go ahead and say that Drew's going to go ahead and order these for what Drew can see. I think he can see Texas. Is that right? Yeah, Texas and Maine. So we've also limited him to different locations that he can work with. So we'll set Texas there. We'll go to the next row and we'll go ahead and set Texas there as the location. And I'm going to close that. So the system's not going to let these transactions go through without the right tag on them for the dimensions that we want to track. Now, as I submit this, brings us back to our main workflow here. This is mainly because he doesn't have anything else to do with this. It's gone out. It's going to require approval with that amount of money. Jumping back to my login, I'm here in the purchasing application. Now, if I'm actively working and purchasing, I can go down to this little Approve Purchasing Transactions button. And here I see that I have this, Drew Jackson has submitted this purchase requisition to Staples for $2,900, and I can approve or decline from here. Now, this is not the only place I can approve or decline. I've also, if I'm the main approver for this, or if I'm his manager, I've received an email about this approval. So I can see that in my email. I could also open up Sage Intacct on a mobile device, on my phone or tablet, and I can do approvals from there remotely. And so I can see all the things that need to be approved on an approvals dashboard on a mobile device. And I can also go to a main dashboard. So if I go back to dashboards and I open up the particular dashboard here, purchasing operations dashboard that I've created, I see that I have this approvals component here on the upper right. And I have this same transaction here from Drew that I can look at. And if I scroll to the right, I can see what date it was. And I can see that I've got some things that need to be handled. And so I have lots of ways that I can go through and approve this. Jumping back to purchasing, when I approve it, I can put in comments. I can, whatever I need to, I can approve this. Maybe I put in some conditional comments and that's gone through and been approved. Something else I could do is go back to these purchase requisitions now. That was opening a new one. I want to look at my purchasing requisitions. And let's say I want to convert this to a PO. So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to a purchase order. And I can actually have a conversation about this as well. So I can go ahead and post this. And any document that I want to view, I can view this purchase order and I can say, something like, how often do we reorder? Maybe. So I want to find out. I'm trying to control costs. I want to know if this is a monthly, quarterly, annual cost. How often do we reorder this? And I can share that comment. I can even set it to talk to Drew Jackson. And I can go ahead and share that. And now this is permanently stored here. And I can see it in my feed. Collaboration Center. I can see that I've got this piece here and I'm talking to Drew Jackson. I put in his login. I think we could actually use his full name and it would work better. So I can go ahead and edit this if I find that I used the wrong name here. And there we see that he's popped up here, and I can add that in. It keeps track of who I'm looking for. And so now that's going to show up on Drew Jackson's feed. When he goes to his collaboration feed, he'll actually get a notification that someone mentioned him in a feed, and he can see this in his feed as well. The other aspect, beyond the approvals that I wanted to point out in purchasing, if we go back to our purchasing overview, is that we have the ability to track this idea of received shipment. So rather than just a purchase order going out, when it's received, the people in our receiving, in our warehouse or wherever we're receiving, can check it against the received shipment order, make sure it's right, and then they can process it forward before we process a vendor invoice. This way we can keep track of all our vendors, whether we're getting things processed on time. So if I look at receive a shipper, something came in, they can document what was in that, or I can look at an existing purchase order. And if I take this purchase order and I convert it to a PO receiver, then the people in the warehouse can look at this and say, did we get 50 cases? Did we get 10 toner cartridges? And if they didn't, they can change these amounts. Something was on back order and we only received 9 of these, and they can go ahead and post that. And so now we have this posted. It's a different transactional amount than the PO, and we have a different amount. So we're keeping track of what we're actually receiving in. So we're adding controls, and we can look back and see which vendors, we can get reports on vendors and see how they're doing, whether they're a good vendor or whether they're consistently having to change from the PO. And so we have some better vendor management here. The other thing we have, because we're at the top level, we're doing this accounting at the top level, is we can share vendors across all these different organizations. So we can start getting some economies of scale. So people working in Texas, Maine, California, Florida can work off a common set of vendors and go back to those vendors and get some discount pricing based on the volume we're doing across our entire organization. So these are just some of the advantage we have in maintaining control in purchasing. We also have spend control that you can set up. I'm not going to dive into that in this demo, but it basically says you set budgets and you can set warnings when a transaction is going to exceed the spend budget. And so that's another way we control costs within the system and manage those costs and manage purchasing. I'm going to jump back over to my dashboards here. Go ahead and leave that page. And I'm going to go back to my presentation at this point. So we've taken a look at procure to pay. Let's jump into immediate visibility. And this is a big deal to a lot of companies as they're growing, to be able to see what's going on in the company. As we look at visibility and reporting, we'll start with built-in role-based dashboards and then look at how you dig deeper, as well as how you, as a finance professional, create unique reporting to exactly match the needs of your business. I'll show you how you can use dimensions to filter and regroup data into meaningful information. We'll also look at how we combine financial and operational information to gain strategic insight into the business. So I've been promising for a while now that we're going to get to discussing these dashboards in a little more depth, and this is where we do it. This is really where reporting starts, is in the dashboard. You have the opportunity within a dashboard to look at upfront metrics. We call them performance cards right here at the top. We also have the ability to filter on date. I can actually create more filters along here, and I could filter by dimensions. I'm going to show you another way we do that as well. And when we get to multi-entity, we can look at different locations or entities. But in my dashboard configuration, and you configure these dashboards yourself. There's lots of configurations you can do. You can bring up menus to look at all the different aspects, and you can decide which filters you want to show on a dashboard. I have the as of date. I could easily put the location on there and save that. And now I would have it rebuild, and it has a drop down for location, so I could filter by a particular location. So I have this dashboard. I have dashboard grouping. So these are role-based. I happen to be in my CFO daily view dashboard. In this company, I have just a few dashboards. I've got the CFO dashboards. I have 2 of those. I've grouped them in a category so I can use a little drop-down menu to move between the ones in that category. And then I have an employee dashboard, a purchasing indirect, and a purchasing operations dashboard. There's not a limit to how many dashboards you could create. So you could create one for purchasing, one for accounts receivable. You could create one for different levels of management and different parts of the company. Perhaps you deal with projects. You want a project dashboard. You could create that to look at metrics around projects or metrics around subscriptions. Any of the things that make sense to you within your company and the things that you want to see on a daily basis for a particular role, you can create a dashboard around that. In this case, I've got this CFO daily view, and I've got some main cards that we want to look at. And any of these cards, I can click on these. For instance, I can click on expenses. Notice how it turns blue. It means it's clickable. And I can drill down into that. And I can see what's driving this summary number that I have up here. And I can see that these are the expenses. This is month ending because I've got a comparison to prior month. And so I have the previous month and the current month. And I've got these compared here. I noticed that my expenses were a little higher here. I had some professional fees. I can go ahead and drill into that and see what's driving that. It looks like there was an expense adjustment, a general ledger entry around that. And so I can go ahead and close that. But I can drill down even further and get right to the transactions that make up these metrics. All the performance cards are really behind the scenes is a group of accounts. We've taken all of our, for instance, all of our asset accounts, and we've created an account group, and then we've pointed this performance card at that account group and said, give us the summary for this month and show us the comparison to the prior month. And that's how that works. So these are configurable by your accounting team. You don't need to rely on IT to come in and create different dashboards for you. You can create these dashboards. And one of the great things about these dashboards is that they provide a point of login and a point of reference for other roles in the company. So as a finance team, you're not a single point of contact for getting reporting. You're delivering reporting on a real-time basis to the stakeholders, to the decision makers in the company. Here we have our cash flow in detail. So this is our standard tabular report, right? We've got our numbers the way we expect to see a report. We can scroll through this. We can click on these different areas to see what's making up these accounts. Notice we've broken this out by entity. So again, we have that dimensional breakout of what's going on in the company where we're breaking things out by entity. Over here, we have net income by location, and we put this into a donut chart. So we can kind of see where our big income's coming from. This tells us a story right here with the visual that California is a pretty big player in the income for our company, as is Texas. And we can click on any one of these and kind of does a little visual jump out here, but it also gives us a drill down. I'll bring that to the middle of the screen of what's going into that number, what's going into that net income number. And then we can drill down on those numbers as well to see the transactions behind these summary information. At any point, if we want to look at just the numbers, we can click Show Data, and it gives us the numbers that are driving this, this simple chart. And then we go back to Show Graph. This is an interesting metric. We have revenue by retail hour, per retail hour by location. And so what we're doing here is we're taking something that is not a financial metric, retail hour, and we're comparing it against the financial metric revenue to generate this chart and to generate some data. And so this is a way that we can compare our different stores based on, how much revenue per retail hour are they getting? Who's the most efficient in sales in these stores? And you can take this with just about any metric. You could do revenue per square foot. You could do revenue per employee or expenses per employee in a company and see how that metric's moving up and down. We see in the nonprofit space, frequently we get a lot of metrics around volunteer hours and efficiency with funds. And so you can use these metrics. Retail hour in this case is something we're collecting. We're capturing that in what we call a statistical account, which is an operational metric, and that gets added in each month. And a lot of these metrics flow in through other systems. Maybe you have something that keeps track of hours at your different locations, and that can use Intacct's open API to post those hours into the financial system, into a statistical account to drive this metric. And so we have a lot of opportunity within our reporting to look at not just the financials, but also the operational efficiency within the company. Another thing we have on dashboards is this collaboration feed. So this is the same piece that we just looked at in the last set, this purchase order that I had a comment on, this is showing up in our collaboration feed. And I can go ahead and look at this here. It was a permanent record now of what was asked. And I can keep this up on my CFO dashboard and see the conversations that are going on in the company. I can set it to things that I follow. I can set it to just things that are related to things I wrote or where someone pointed to me in a comment. And so I have a lot of control over this, but this feed can be up on my dashboard and I can make this my login point into the company. We can create balance sheets by entity again, breaking out different types of metrics that we can have these standard reports against these different entities and along these different dimensions. I'm going to jump over really quick to another dashboard. This is my sales view. Oh, it was actually on my sales view, wasn't I? I'm going over to my purchasing operations, sorry. In purchasing operations, we see some interesting reports. We've got budgets that we've set up, and so we can have indirect spend, actual versus budget. We can set up different analysis on spending. So we've got our purchasing analysis. We've got purchasing of a particular product. So the Defender is one of our products, and so we want to look at what our purchasing history is for this product. We can look at our receipt history, vendor aging. So you can put a number of reports in here. You can also go out and look at the reports notice some of these slide over quite a bit or they're much larger. I can go ahead and click on this view all and it'll ask me how I want to look at it. And we'll say, okay, we'll look at it in a printable format. And it'll go ahead and give me a printable format of that. I can also look at it in an online format. Force it to open in Acrobat as a PDF to export it and share it. If I want to make it drillable, I can go in the HTML format. And now I can drill down on any of these transactions and I can look at the transaction related to the amount of this purchase. In addition to this, we have our report center. And so when I go out to my report center, it's just another application tab. I get all my reports. And if I open up my board here, I can see that I've got the availability to go in and break out my dimension. This is where I can control my dimension groups and my dimension structures. And so beyond having dimensions that we can tag things with, like tagging each location, I can also create groups of dimensions. So if I've created a dimension around some metric in my company that I want to keep track of, maybe I have this metric of employee and I put it into groups of different types of employees. And I can look at metrics according to those different types of employees, or I can set it by location or territory. In this case, we have a dimension structure. Maybe you work in real estate and you want to keep track of municipalities. And so you could create a dimension for municipality, and then you could create groups of dimensions for those different types of municipalities that you're dealing with. And so you can create multiple levels of reporting that break down your information according to your dimensions and your groups of dimensions. I can click on any of these, these balance sheets. This is the balance sheet by entity over time. I'm just going to do all my locations and departments. And so this is going to open up. I can expand this to the full area here of the screen. And I can look at, I can drill down into this report into any of these areas. I can tell it to print. I can export it to Excel. If I need this information in another format or want to manipulate it in some way or combine it with other operational reporting that I'm doing. The other thing I can do with any of these is I can take this report and I can edit it. And this is one of the great powers of reporting within Sage Intacct, is that I don't have to go to IT to script out something for my reports. I can, as a finance person, I can go in and I can make adjustments to my reports. Maybe I like this report. I may want to duplicate this report and then start working on the duplicate. So I would duplicate it, rename it, and then start changing the report to do something else. So I don't have to start from scratch, creating a new report from nothing. But I can go ahead and I can make changes to the rows. I can rearrange the rows. I can decide what detail, whether it's summary or detail, what the basis is. In this case, it's a default from a group, the basis for the amounts, whether I want to always display it or I want it to hide to be hidden, and then I can expand it when the report is being viewed. I could look at my different columns. I create the columns in my report and I decide what they do. These expand as I go to work on the different columns. And I can define, if they're looking at a particular period, I can define if it's going to be a calculated value, and I can set calculations on certain columns. I define that in my computations, so I can create computations on these different columns. I can create filters. I can define which ones get included, which ones get prompted. Notice I had those 2 prompts for department and location at the beginning. That came up because I had these 2 prompts checked. So the user at what we call runtime, basically at the time the report is going to run, gets a prompt to make decisions about the filters that are going to be used in the report at that time. I can even set an as of date. Maybe I want a consistent report. I create a copy of a report. I want it to just run. That was my end of year report. That's where I want it to stop. I give it an as of date, as of 12/31/2017. That's it. And that's where I want that report to statically stay. And I could label it that way. I can generate different formats, and permissions are really important. So I can set who gets to look at this report. So some reports might be more sensitive than others, and you can set the report to be available to everyone, or you can set it to be hidden from everyone and only give access to a few people. You get to decide who's on the list, who gets to see reports. And it's not a matter of it being grayed out. They just won't even see it in their list of reports. And so there's a lot of versatility here. I'm not going to go into everything. We have some classes actually on how to use the financial report writer and really get the most out of it. But it's a huge part of the visibility into Sage Intacct. I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm not going to change this report at this time. You can also do the same thing with charts. And so I can have, notice these are my financial reports, my main financial reports, but I also have reports on the general ledger and under each of the applications, purchasing, order entry, and so on. And I can do the same thing with these reports. I can go and make changes to them, edit them as needed. Some reports are standard. There's certain standard reports, and we kind of lock those down so you have them and they're always working the right way. I can also memorize reports, meaning I can go in to any of these reports and I can say, save this report with these settings. These are the filters I want. Memorize it, save it to my memorized list, and then I can take those memorized reports and I can schedule them. I can go ahead and set schedules to have them delivered. So maybe I have a month-end schedule of reports. I have these 5 reports that get delivered to somebody at the end of the month. And they have all them memorized. They're going to be just for the current month or end of quarter, however you want to set it up. You can also set your favorite reports. I can go to any of these reports here, and I can take this report right here and just click the star. It's now a favorite. And when I go over to my favorites, I have that report there. I can do the same thing with dashboards. I can go to any of my dashboards on this list. I can take a report like this and say, I want that one to be a favorite, and I want that one to be a favorite. And now my favorite list has both of these dashboards on it. And so that you've got quick access to the things that you use most. Make it quick and easy for you. With that, I'm going back to this dashboard. Let's jump back over to our presentation really quick and see where we're at in this demo. This brings us to our last section, multi-entity management. A big part of growth for many companies involves dealing with multiple entities. We've already seen several references in the demo of multi-entity functionality. Let me show you more precisely how Sage Intacct helps you manage financials for multiple entities from a single login. So as we look at multi-entity, I've gone to this drop-down before, and you can see that we've got access as an administrator with we call a super user. I have access to all the entities, and I can go in to any one of these entities and do accounting in that entity and it will be just for that entity. So for instance, I'm going to jump over here to Texas, and notice it opens a new tab here in my browser. The old tab is still open with the top level. And from here, I can see that I've got this same CFO dashboard with daily view, but the numbers are different because it's only reflecting the financials for Texas. Notice it's income by location, net income by, it just reflects Texas. Same with this per retail hour by location, it's only showing Texas. And so I've got these different metrics, but I'm only looking, in this case, it's breaking down into 2 locations of Dallas and Austin and showing me metrics there. And so I can do accounting in this as if it was only in the Texas environment. So I can do my purchasing and my orders from here. And in this case, we go into order entry and we create an order. When I go and choose an item and I go down here, it's already put in the location. Remember, we went back and we added locations when we were working from the top level. Because we're in the Texas entity, location is already added automatically to our orders. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Just want to point out some things that are being done automatically for you in these different orders. Another thing we have access to in the different dimensions, notice we still have this same group of customers. As you saw when I did the drop down from order entry, we still have our same group of customers available. These are managed at the top level. The other thing we've got is what's going on here with the 4 entities is that we have this continual consolidation going on, meaning that if I do transactions in Texas or in California, and I enter these transactions and I hit the general ledger, that's going to roll up to my reporting at this top level. So when I come back to this top level, I'm going to see that reflected in my revenue and assets and income and expenses. I'm going to see those things happening here because they're using a shared chart of accounts across these companies. In instances where you can't have a shared chart of accounts, perhaps you're doing business in a foreign country and that country's government requires you to have a certain set of accounts, or maybe you've merged a couple of companies and those companies have very different types of businesses and you don't want to go through the trouble of creating a shared chart of accounts. They have different charts of accounts. You can map those to a top level chart of accounts. And then with that top level, you can do what's called global consolidations. And that allows you to just consolidate any of those entities at any time. It's just a couple of clicks. Some companies have even automated it using Intacct's open API. We have an API call for running a global consolidation across your organization. And this is just a little bit of the controls we have, a little bit of the way we get into these different entities. And I mentioned this earlier, I want to point it out again, that when I go over here to Drew Jackson's login, and we look at his limited access, we can see that he also has limited access in terms of entities. So you can set users to only work in certain entities. So you can set a user just to work in the Texas entity or just the California entity, and they won't be able to work in other entities. And when they log in, it's just as if they're logging into just a single entity company. But at the top level, you have access to all the entities and you can move between them and do accounting in those different entities. Oh, I also want to mention you can nest them. So here we actually have locations within these, but those are actual locations, not entities. We actually have just 4 entities, but you can nest entities within one another. So you can create a group of European entities, and then maybe you have an entity in Germany, an entity in France, an entity in Switzerland or something, and you can group those different entities. And then you can just do roll-ups within the groups, and you can do roll-ups for the entire organization. With that, we've come to the end of our demo portion. I'm going to jump back to our presentation. So why choose Sage Intacct? Well, we're the right partner to help in your success. As a leader in innovation, we're recognized as a visionary by industry analysts like Gartner. We're the cloud accounting leader in customer satisfaction with a rating of 98 out of 100 on G2 Crowd across over 2,000 reviews. We are the first and only preferred financial solution of the AICPA, and we're the preferred choice of the IFAC. As you grow, you're going to find that other partners are a best fit for other aspects of your organization, like CRM, payroll, and planning. As a best-in-class solution, Sage Intacct integrates nicely with dozens of these solutions. You have the flexibility to choose integrated solutions that make the most sense for your business. You can also swap out those systems as you grow and change. We really do want to be your partner for the life of your business. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you saw some things that align with where your finance team is going. We'd love to hear from you and even do a demo of how Sage Intacct can meet your specific needs. If you want to learn more about Sage Intacct, you can try our 30-day trial, attend additional webinars, follow us on Twitter, or connect with us on Facebook, or even just contact us directly. Thank you for spending time with us. I hope you have a wonderful day.